Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a crisp medieval morning. Imagine the biting chill seeping through the cracks of your wattle-and daub home, the smells of wood smoke and, well, let's just say unwashed humanity clinging to the air. The roosters are already screaming, because, of course, they are, and the whole village is about to erupt into a symphony of grunts, coughs, and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Let's hope you're a sound sleeper, because frankly, you probably won't survive this if you're not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below with where you're watching from and your local time. Always curious where you all are as we drift off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sensation, even before you fully open your eyes, is the cold. Brutal, unrelenting cold. You're not snuggled under a down duvet, oh no. You're under a scratchy wool blanket, maybe two if you're lucky, and a straw-filled mattress that feels suspiciously like it's playing host to a family of particularly enthusiastic beetles. You shift, trying to find a warmer spot, but the cold seems to have infiltrated every fiber of your being. This is life before central heating, friends. As you reluctantly peel your eyelids apart, you're greeted by the dim, filtered light struggling to penetrate the grime-coated windows, or, more likely, the shutters. Forget blackout curtains, you're at the mercy of the sun's schedule. If the sun is up, so are you. No hitting snooze in the 14th century. The concept of sleeping in simply did not exist for most medieval folks. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, another questionable act of bravery considering what might be lurking down there, and plant your bare feet on the cold, hard floor. Time to get dressed. Now, picture your wardrobe. Forget the carefully curated selection of ethically sourced organic cotton. We're talking layers of heavy wool and linen, probably still damp from yesterday's chores. One of the primary roles of clothing was insulation, since homes rarely had any. Underwear? Well, that's a debatable topic. Some argue that people wore linen undergarments to protect their skin from the rough wool, while others insist that they were a luxury reserved for the upper classes. Historians still argue whether everyone had underwear. Either way, you're pulling on whatever's available, hoping it doesn't smell too much like a stable. Speaking of smells, let's address the elephant, or rather, the privy, in the room. Indoor plumbing. A distant dream. Your morning constitutional involves a trip to the outhouse, a rickety structure that's probably shared by several families. The aroma is intense. And let's just say sanitation practices weren't exactly top-notch. You do your business quickly, hoping to avoid any unwanted encounters with flies or, worse, rats. Remember, personal hygiene was a little different back then. Bathing was rare, partly because it was considered unhealthy, partly because it was a hassle, and partly because, well, people were just used to being a bit fragrant. Once you're semi-presentable, and by presentable, I mean not actively covered in mud, it's time for breakfast. Don't expect a fancy avocado toast or a smoothie bowl. Your morning meal is likely to consist of a hunk of stale bread, maybe some cheese if you're lucky, and perhaps a bowl of watery porridge. If it's autumn, and you got lucky with the harvest, you might have some fruit too. Meat was a rare treat, reserved for special occasions. And coffee? Forget about it. Your morning beverage is probably ale, weak and watery, but still, ale. I imagine it could be a real jump start. After breakfast, it's time to get to work. And believe me, there's plenty to do. Most people in medieval Europe were peasants, which meant they spent their days toiling in the fields. You might be plowing, planting, harvesting, or tending to livestock. The work is backbreaking and monotonous, but it's essential for survival. The rhythm of the work, dictated by the seasons and the whims of the weather, becomes ingrained in your bones. And don't think children are exempt from the labor. As soon as they're old enough to walk and carry things, they're put to work. Gathering firewood, tending to animals, scaring away birds from the crops, every little bit helps. Remember, everyone has to contribute to the household survival. Between chores, there are all sorts of odd jobs needed to be completed. If you are a man, you might be required to do military service for the king. If you are a woman, you may be asked to brew some ale for the local pub or the nobility. Now, amidst the hardship and drudgery, there were moments of joy and community. Village festivals, religious holidays, and simple gatherings at the local tavern provided much-needed respite from the daily grind. There'd be music, dancing, games, and plenty of ale, a potent combination for merriment and, occasionally, a bit of trouble. And don't underestimate the power of storytelling. In a world without books or screens, stories were a vital form of entertainment and cultural transmission, carrying history, legends, and moral lessons from one generation to the next. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, signaling the end of the workday, you trudge back to your humble abode, exhausted and sore. But there's still work to be done. You need to collect firewood, tend to the animals, and prepare the evening meal. Again, simple fare, perhaps a stew of vegetables and whatever scraps of meat you can find. You and your family eat together, sharing stories and laughter. As evening rolls around, you might spend time fixing tools for the next day. After dinner, you might gather around the fire to tell stories or sing songs. If you are lucky, there will be a traveling minstrel that you will be able to listen to and dance to. At long last, it's time for bed. You crawl back under your scratchy blankets, grateful for the warmth, however meager, they provide. As you drift off to sleep, you can't help but think about the day ahead. It will be much the same as today, filled with hard work and simple pleasures. But that's life in medieval Europe. But here's a fun fact for you: the concept of personal space was practically non-existent. People lived in close quarters, and physical contact was common. Sharing a bed with family members, and even strangers, was perfectly normal. So, cozy up, folks, because in the medieval world, you're never truly alone. It's enough to make you shudder, isn't it? And here's a quirky tidbit for you: did you know that medieval people believed that bathing too often could be harmful to your health? They thought that water could wash away the good humors that kept you healthy and strong. So, don't feel too bad about skipping that shower, you're just being historically accurate. As the sun sets, you look forward to getting to your warm bed. But medieval bedding was not what you might expect. Beds were stuffed with straw, hay, or even feathers, depending on your social status. The quality of the bed directly reflected your wealth. While you get ready to go to sleep, let me ask you this: who would like to sleep in that kind of bed? Now, a question that historians still argue about is, what did children do for fun? While their days would be filled with chores, they also would have free time. Children enjoyed games like tag, marbles, and blind man's bluff. They also would make toys from wood or clay. And, in some cases, the children would have pet animals like dogs, cats, and birds. You trudge into the kitchen, the early morning light assaulting your weary eyes. The year is 1750. Or is it? Honestly, does it really matter? What does matter is breakfast, the most important meal of the day, or so they say. And today, you're going to experience two vastly different breakfasts. One fit for a king, or at least someone pretending to be, and one that's fit for someone who works all day in the fields. Let's start with the peasant's breakfast. Let's be honest, it's not going to be pretty. Imagine waking up in a cramped, damp cottage. The air is thick with the smell of earth and, let's be frank, unwashed bodies. There are no fancy scented candles here, no delicate floral arrangements. Just the hard reality of rural life. You might find a hunk of stale bread, probably dark and dense, sitting on the roughly hewn wooden table. It's been sitting there for, who knows how long. Days, maybe even weeks. We are operating on a use it until it crumbles into dust policy here. Maybe, if you're lucky, there's a small piece of cheese. Something hard and pungent, the kind that could double as a weapon in a pinch. Forget the creamy brie or the delicate goat cheese you might find in a modern artisan shop. This is cheese designed to last, to survive the harsh realities of a pre-refrigeration world. And, if the fates are truly smiling upon you, there might be a bowl of thin porridge. Made from oats or barley, cooked in water, and seasoned with, well, nothing much. Maybe a pinch of salt, if you're feeling extravagant. Historians still argue whether the lack of seasoning was due to genuine scarcity or just a lack of culinary imagination. It probably was a bit of both. Now, you might be thinking, but what about vegetables? Surely they ate vegetables. And you'd be right, sort of. If it's the right time of year, you might have some root vegetables, turnips, carrots, maybe a few onions. Boiled, of course, until they've surrendered all semblance of flavor. These vegetables were essential for adding some much-needed vitamins to the peasant diet, which was otherwise heavy in carbohydrates and lacking in protein. As for drinks, water. Plain, unadulterated water. Maybe, if you're incredibly lucky, you might have some weak ale. But ale was more common in the evenings, a reward for a long day of back-breaking labor. This peasant breakfast is all about sustenance. It's about fueling your body for a day of hard work. It's not about pleasure, it's not about indulgence. It's about survival. Fun fact, peasants in some regions were known to occasionally eat hedgehogs. Roasted, of course. Don't ask me how they caught them. Now, let's fast forward to the opulent world of the wealthy. Wake up in a lavishly decorated bedroom, sunlight streaming through silk curtains. The air is filled with the scent of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Servants attend to your every need. You haven't even opened your eyes properly, and someone is already offering you a warm towel. Ah, the sweet life. Breakfast for the wealthy is a completely different affair. It's a theatrical performance, a display of status and privilege. Instead of stale bread, you're presented with freshly baked pastries. Light, fluffy croissants, delicate pain au chocolate, perhaps a sugared brioche or two. All made with the finest white flour, of course. None of that coarse, dark bread for you. Instead of hard cheese, you have a selection of creamy cheeses, imported from far and wide. Soft cheeses, hard cheeses, cheeses infused with herbs and spices. It's a veritable cheese extravaganza. Instead of watery porridge, you have, well, you might still have porridge, but it's a completely different beast. This porridge is made with milk, cream, and butter. It's sweetened with honey or sugar and topped with dried fruits, nuts, and spices. It's practically dessert. And let's not forget the meat. Perhaps a slice of ham, smoked salmon, or even a small roasted bird. The wealthy had access to a wide variety of meats, allowing them to indulge in protein-rich meals. And the drinks? Oh, the drinks. Forget water. You have coffee, tea, or chocolate. These exotic beverages were expensive and highly prized, symbols of wealth and sophistication. In the 18th century, chocolate was often consumed as a drink, rather than a solid. It was mixed with spices like chili and vanilla, creating a rich, complex flavor. Yum! Fresh fruit, of course, is essential. Seasonal berries, imported citrus fruits, perhaps even a slice of melon. The wealthy had access to fruits from all over the world, a testament to their global reach. This breakfast is not just about sustenance, it's about pleasure. It's about indulgence, about showing off your wealth and status. It's about enjoying the finer things in life. And maybe, just maybe, about subtly taunting the poor. Just kidding. Sort of. Now, here's a quirky fact for you. In some wealthy households, it was fashionable to keep pet monkeys. These monkeys were often dressed in miniature versions of the latest fashions and were allowed to roam freely around the house, causing mayhem and generally being adorable nuisances. Because nothing says, "I have too much money," like a tiny, fur-covered kleptomaniac. Historians still argue whether the elaborate breakfast rituals of the wealthy were purely for pleasure or also served a political purpose. Were they simply enjoying themselves, or were they consciously using food to reinforce their social dominance? It's a tough question to answer. Maybe they were just hungry. Consider the sheer amount of labor involved in preparing these meals. The peasants spent their days toiling in the fields, producing the raw materials that ended up on the tables of the wealthy. And the wealthy, in turn, relied on armies of servants to cook, serve, and clean up after their lavish meals. It's a stark reminder of the social inequalities that existed during this period. Imagine the sensory overload of a wealthy breakfast. The sights, the smells, the tastes, it's a feast for the senses. In contrast, the peasant's breakfast is a study in austerity, a reminder of the harsh realities of poverty. One might even say, a bit bland. That's one joke, I think. Maybe I'm too tired. Another difference lies in the social context of the meal. The peasant breakfast was often eaten quickly and in silence, a prelude to a long day of work. The wealthy breakfast, on the other hand, was a social occasion, a time to relax, converse, and enjoy the company of friends and family. Think of it as the 18th century equivalent of brunch. Did you know that forks weren't always standard utensils? Using them was once considered a feat. You'd be using your hands a lot more at that peasant table. Now, as you sit at your imaginary breakfast table, consider the implications of these two vastly different meals. One is a symbol of privilege and excess, the other a testament to survival and resilience. Both are reflections of the social and economic realities of the time. Which one would you prefer? The answer is probably pretty obvious, right? Who wouldn't want a mountain of pastries and a never-ending supply of coffee? But it's important to remember that these breakfasts are not just about food. They are about power, about inequality, and about the stark differences between the lives of the rich and the poor. So, the next time you sit down to breakfast, take a moment to appreciate the food on your plate and the circumstances that made it possible. And maybe, just maybe, spare a thought for the peasants of the past, who toiled in the fields to provide for the wealthy. Or to the hedgehogs. Whichever seems more poignant to you. Okay, just one more thing. Back then, it was considered good luck to drop food on the floor at a wedding feast. So, don't feel bad if you're clumsy. I mean, don't try to drop it. That would be weird. But if it happens, hey, you're basically wishing the happy couple well. Joke number 2. I'm on a roll, sort of. Mostly a slow, gentle wobble. And, just because I can't resist. What do you call a wealthy peasant? A very berry. Okay, I'll see myself out. That's 3 jokes. Gold star for me. Okay, that's all for now. We have covered the vast topic of breakfast, and explored the lives of the rich and poor and the food they consumed. And I think, it's time to say goodnight. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's just, drift back a little, shall we? Not too far. Imagine stepping, or perhaps more accurately, being shoved, into a world where your clothes shout your resume to everyone you meet. Before you even open your mouth, before they see the gleam in your eye, they know, well, they think they know who you are. You trudge along a muddy street, and the very fabric clinging to your skin is screaming your story. If you're draped in rough-spun wool, smelling faintly of lanolin and honest labor, congratulations. You're probably a peasant. Maybe a yeoman farmer if you're lucky, and your wool is of a slightly finer weave. Feel that itch? That's the price of agrarian living, baby. Every scratch is a reminder of your connection to the land, a connection that also keeps you firmly rooted in your social stratum. You wouldn't believe how much of the population in, say, medieval Europe, consisted of the common folk. We're talking 80 to 90%. That's a whole lot of itchiness, when you think about it. But hey, at least you have clothes. In some parts of the world, and during certain periods, simply owning enough fabric to cover yourself was a luxury. Imagine having to choose between feeding your family and buying that extra layer to ward off the winter chill. Now that's a fashion dilemma. Talk about a wear it or eat it situation. I guess you'd say that's what you call a close-knit family, am I right? Sorry, not sorry. Now, let's say, just maybe, you're sporting a doublet of velvet, embroidered with gold thread. Perhaps a jaunty hat adorned with feathers. Ah, well, hello there, upper crust. Your clothes speak of leisure, of wealth, of access to materials and skilled artisans. People will bow, figuratively or literally, depending on the era. Your access to resources screams, I have access to resources. You become a walking, talking advertisement for your lineage. But you have to watch out. Because sumptuary laws might be a thing. Basically, these were the fashion police of yesteryear, dictating who could wear what based on their social standing. Want to rock purple dye, traditionally derived from sea snails. Better be royalty, or a high-ranking clergyman, otherwise you're asking for trouble. Wearing ermine trim if you weren't a noble. Straight to jail. Fashion faux pas carried a bit more weight back then. A ton more weight. Historians still argue whether sumptuary laws were genuinely effective at maintaining social order, or simply a tool for the elite to flaunt their power and control the aspirations of the lower classes. It's kind of like debating whether avocado toast is actually ruining millennials' chances of homeownership. I think we all know the truth, but the argument is still pretty fun. And speaking of debates, let's talk about colors. Color, or the availability of it, was a major status symbol. Bright, vibrant colors were expensive. Think about the effort and ingredients required to create certain dyes. Remember that purple from sea snails? Saffron, derived from the delicate stigmas of the crocus flower, gave a brilliant yellow. These were treasures, hoarded and displayed by those who could afford them. Faded, muted tones. Those were for the masses. It's basically the historical equivalent of wearing designer clothes versus shopping at, well, you know. Now, a quirky little tidbit for you, did you know that in some cultures, the length of your shoes denoted your status? In certain periods and places, elongated shoes, so long they needed to be supported with chains attached to the knees, were all the rage among the wealthy. Imagine trying to walk gracefully, tripping over your own footwear while simultaneously attempting to look down your nose at the hoi polloi. Fashion, am I right? If you are a woman, and you find yourself sporting layers upon layers of fabric, tightly laced into a corset that makes breathing an optional activity, you are likely of noble birth. The sheer impracticality of your attire shouts privilege. You're not expected to lift a finger, literally. Your clothes are a declaration of your dependence, and therefore, your wealth. However, if you're a woman in simpler attire, maybe a sturdy kirtle and apron, you're more likely involved in domestic chores or perhaps even working the land. Your clothes are practical, durable, and designed for movement. You're not trying to impress anyone with your wealth, you're trying to get things done. Although it is well known that women did have power and influence, it's often understated in mainstream historical narratives. And let's not forget the accessories. Jewelry, belts, pouches, even the buttons on your coat, these were all opportunities to display wealth and status. A simple silver buckle could denote a certain level of affluence, while a belt adorned with precious stones screamed, I have so much money, I don't even know what to do with it. Fun fact, in the 18th century, buckles became so elaborate and fashionable that men even wore 2 to 3 on each shoe. I guess you could say they were buckling under the pressure to look good. I told you I was sorry, but you know what? I lied. And then there's the hair. Or, more specifically, the head coverings. Hats, bonnets, veils, wigs, these were all crucial elements of sartorial storytelling. In many cultures, head coverings denoted marital status, religious affiliation, and even occupation. A simple linen cap might signify a working woman, while an elaborate feathered hat could indicate a noblewoman of high rank. The bigger the hat, the bigger the deal, right? But here's a quirky bit of history for you. Wigs, particularly among men, were a major status symbol in the 17th and 18th centuries. The bigger and more elaborate the wig, the more important you were. A massive powdered wig wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a walking advertisement for your social standing. Imagine the upkeep. All that powder, all that curling. Talk about a high-maintenance hairstyle. Historians still debate the role of fashion in promoting social mobility. Did clothing ever truly allow someone to fake it till you make it, climbing the social ladder simply by dressing the part? Or was it always a superficial veneer, easily seen through by those in the know? Some say that the right clothes could open doors, creating opportunities for advancement. Others argue that true social mobility required more than just a fancy wardrobe. Consider the guilds, for instance. These medieval and early modern organizations controlled the production and sale of goods, including textiles and clothing. Becoming a master craftsman, and therefore having the ability to produce high-quality garments, was a path to economic and social advancement. But it required years of apprenticeship, skill, and access to resources. It wasn't as simple as just slapping on a fancy doublet and declaring yourself a nobleman. And remember, fashion is always evolving. What was considered stylish and appropriate in one era might be deemed scandalous in another. Think about the changing hemlines of women's skirts throughout history. A slightly raised hemline could signify modernity and freedom, while a return to floor-length gowns could indicate a return to more conservative values. It's all a big, complicated, sartorial dance. So, as you stumble through this world, remember to pay attention to the details. The fabrics, the colors, the accessories, they all tell a story. And that story will shape how others perceive you, and how you perceive yourself. It's a world where your clothes aren't just clothes, they're a social passport, a declaration of identity, and a reflection of the complex and ever-changing dynamics of power and status. And just one last, quirky thought to leave you with: in some cultures, certain fabrics were believed to possess magical properties. Wearing a garment made from a specific material could supposedly ward off evil spirits, bring good luck, or even enhance your fertility. Talk about power dressing. So next time you're choosing an outfit, consider whether it's just making you look good, or if it's also protecting you from the forces of darkness. I'm thinking a tinfoil hat made of linen would be good protection. Anyway, that's all for now. Sweet dreams, or should I say, well-dressed dreams. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about work. Real work. Not the kind where you're answering emails in your pajamas while cradling a lukewarm latte. We're talking pre-industrial revolution, sunrise to sunset, body-breaking labor. Get ready to feel grateful for your ergonomic chair. You trudge. That's the first sensation. Not walk, not stroll, not even hike. Trudge. You trudge through the pre-dawn mist, the dew soaking your worn leather boots and chilling your bare ankles. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and something, manure. Why, probably manure. Definitely manure. You can already hear the bleating of sheep in the distance, a sound that will be your constant companion for the next, well, basically forever. Your breath mists in the cold air. You clutch your meager breakfast, a hunk of stale bread that feels like it could break a tooth. You haven't even started working yet, and you're already tired. Welcome to medieval life, or really any pre-industrial society, where Netflix and chill meant, well, probably nothing, since Netflix wouldn't exist for centuries. And chill wasn't really an option. You reach the fields, a vast expanse of brown stretching out before you. Today, it's planting day. Backbreaking work. Stooping, digging, planting, over and over again, until your muscles scream and your vision blurs. Your back already hurts, and you haven't even planted your first seed. You can practically feel the blisters forming on your hands. Lovely. The sun begins to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a beautiful spectacle completely wasted on your aching body. You wish you had sunglasses. That's when you remember that sunglasses wouldn't be invented for centuries either. Double lovely. You work alongside your family, your neighbors, your entire village. Everyone is in the same boat, a leaky, overcrowded boat sailing towards a never-ending horizon of toil. There's a rhythm to the work, a kind of grim, communal dance dictated by the seasons and the whims of the weather. Each movement echoes the one before. Dig. Place. Cover. Repeat. Mainstream historical fact. Agriculture was the backbone of the medieval economy. Shocker, I know. But really, it was everything. Without a good harvest, everyone starved. That's a lot of pressure on your poor, aching back. You might wonder who came up with the division of labor in the village. Usually, that was determined by social standing and skill, and that's where things get quirky. Quirky tidbit time. Did you know that in some medieval villages, there were designated ale tasters? These folks, usually women, oddly enough, were responsible for ensuring that the ale brewed in the village was of acceptable quality. It was a really important job, since ale was a staple drink, often safer than water. They'd literally sit around and drink ale all day. You can't help but think that's a better job than planting crops under the hot sun. You wonder if they were hiring. Back to reality. You keep planting, the sun beating down on your neck. The sweat stings your eyes, and your clothes are plastered to your body. The lord of the manor rides by on his horse, surveying his land. He nods curtly, barely acknowledging your existence. You suppress the urge to throw a clump of dirt at him. Historians still argue whether the feudal system was inherently exploitative. Okay, not really. Most agree that it was. But, you know, some historians might try to argue that it provided a sense of stability and order. But try telling that to your throbbing muscles and sunburnt skin. Lunch is another hunk of stale bread, perhaps with a bit of cheese if you're lucky. You eat it quickly, sitting in the shade of a tree, trying to conserve your energy. You glance at your fellow workers. They look as exhausted as you feel. You imagine what life would be like if you were a noble, a knight, or even just a slightly more comfortable merchant. Then, you sigh and get back to work. The afternoon is even worse. The sun is at its highest point, baking the earth and turning the air into a shimmering haze. Your hands are raw and bleeding, and your back feels like it's about to snap. You fantasize about inventing some kind of farming machine, something that could do all this work for you. Of course, you have no idea how to invent anything. You just want it to be over. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, you finally finish your row. You straighten up, wincing at the pain in your back. You look out at the field, at the rows of newly planted seeds. You feel a small sense of accomplishment, a tiny spark of pride. You helped create something. You helped provide food for your community. But mostly, you're just tired. So tired. You trudge back to your village, the same muddy path you trudged down this morning now imprinted even deeper on your mind. You imagine you'll have nightmares about that path tonight. You pass other workers, their faces etched with fatigue. You exchange weary nods, a silent acknowledgement of your shared suffering. You reach your small, humble home. It's nothing fancy, just a one-room cottage with a thatched roof. But it's your home. You collapse inside, your body aching in every joint. Your spouse greets you with a weary smile and a pot of thin soup. You eat in silence, grateful for the warmth and the nourishment. After dinner, you help with the chores, feeding the animals, mending clothes, preparing for the next day. There's always something to do. You're too tired to think, too tired to feel. You just go through the motions, like a machine. Okay, time for a joke. What do you call a medieval knight who's afraid to fight? Surrender. Get it? Surrender. No. Okay, never mind. Before drifting off to sleep, you might gather with other villagers in the local tavern. It's the only real form of entertainment. Here, you might hear a traveling musician, a local storyteller, or just listen to the murmur of conversation. Maybe someone is discussing alchemy, the pseudoscience of trying to turn lead into gold. Fringe tidbit. Alchemy was huge in the medieval era. People genuinely believed they could create the philosopher's stone, which would grant them immortality and the ability to transmute metals. Think of it as the medieval version of trying to become a crypto millionaire. And the alchemists were definitely just as successful. You finally crawl into your straw-filled mattress, pulling a rough wool blanket over you. The smells of the day still cling to you: earth, sweat, manure. You close your eyes, trying to block out the aches and pains. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of fields, of seeds, of endless toil. And of ale tasters who seem to have all the fun. Before you can really relax into sleep, you remember the landlord's wife needed silk. So in addition to everything else you'll have to do tomorrow, you'll also have to remember to spend some time and effort to create silk that the lord and lady want to buy. Historians still debate the extent to which medieval peasants had agency over their own lives. Did they simply accept their fate, or did they actively resist the feudal system? The truth is probably somewhere in between. You do what you can to survive, to provide for your family, to make life a little bit better. Sometimes, that means accepting your lot. Sometimes, it means pushing back. Sometimes, it just means telling a bad joke at the end of a very long, very hard day. You drift off again. And so goes another day. Get ready for another one tomorrow. Oh, I have another joke, you say. Why did the serf cross the road? Because he was told to. Yes, it's awful. I know. And with that, friend, let's call it a night. You've earned your rest. Even if the rest you get isn't exactly restful. You'll be up early to trudge again. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's dim the lights a little, maybe put on some Gregorian chant, because, friends, we're diving deep into the medieval church. And trust me, you're gonna need all the atmospheric help you can get. Imagine stepping, no, trudging, through a muddy medieval village. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, livestock, and, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't exactly a high priority back then. You squint against the weak sunlight, and there it is, dominating the skyline, the church. Seriously, it's everywhere. Physically, metaphorically, spiritually, you can't throw a stone without hitting something connected to the church. Please don't actually throw stones, though. Medieval architecture is delicate. And remember, this wasn't just a Sunday thing. Religion permeated every single aspect of medieval life. Birth, marriage, death, agriculture, warfare, the church had its fingers in every pie. Or, every loaf of rye bread. You might think, okay, yeah, religion was important. Got it. But think about the sheer, constant presence of it. The church bells ringing out the hours, the festivals dedicated to various saints, the endless cycle of prayers and rituals. It's like living inside a very, very long and elaborate religious service. Talk about commitment. I mean, my commitment is rewatching comfort shows after a long day. These people's comfort was the church, in a weird way. And speaking of long services, imagine you're attending one of those masses. Latin, of course. Because why make it easy? The priest drones on, the incense burns your nostrils, and you haven't the faintest clue what he's saying. You look around and see everyone else bowing their heads, muttering along, probably also not understanding a word. But hey, at least you're all suffering together, right? Shared misery brings people closer, or so I've heard. Sort of like binge-watching a terrible reality show with your friends. You hate it, but you hate it together. Now, here's a fun fact: did you know that some medieval churches had leeching windows? These little holes in the wall were specifically designed for applying leeches to the sick. So, next time you're feeling under the weather, you can just pop down to your local church and, oh, wait. Never mind. Times change, and for good reason. Historians still argue whether the sheer pervasiveness of religious ritual was a genuine expression of faith, or simply a product of social pressure and lack of other options. Were these folks truly devout, or were they just going through the motions because, frankly, what else were they going to do? No Netflix, no TikTok, just the constant, looming presence of the Almighty. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? You find yourself thinking, hey, maybe doom scrolling isn't so bad after all. But let's not just focus on the formal stuff. Parish life, your average, everyday village church, was the center of the community. It was where you got baptized, married, and, eventually, eulogized. It was where you celebrated feast days and mourned losses. It was also, often, where you held village meetings, stored grain in times of hardship, and maybe even enjoyed a good old-fashioned brawl after a few too many flagons of ale. You know, after the sermon. Gotta be respectful first. Think of your local church or community center. Now, imagine that place holding all of the important events in your life. Every single one. That's the medieval parish. It's like the ultimate multi-purpose venue, part sanctuary, part town hall, part social club, part storage unit. Oh, and get this, some parishes even had their own ale wives, women who brewed and sold ale to raise money for the church. Now that is a fundraising strategy one can get behind. Forget bake sales, give me a pint of medieval ale any day. Although, knowing medieval brewing techniques, it probably tasted more like pond water than your favorite craft beer. But hey, it was for a good cause, right? The priest himself was a figure of considerable importance. Often, he was the only literate person in the village. So, he wasn't just your spiritual guide, he was also your scribe, your record keeper, your medieval notary public. He'd write letters for you, read important documents, and generally keep the village from descending into utter chaos. Basically, the medieval equivalent of tech support. Now, not all priests were created equal. Some were genuinely pious and dedicated to their flock. Others, well, let's just say they were more interested in the finer things in life. We're talking about priests who were known to gamble, drink to excess, and maybe even, gasp, have children. Shocking, I know. But hey, nobody's perfect. Even medieval clergymen had their flaws. I mean, haven't we all succumbed to the siren song of a second helping of dessert? Or a third, or a fourth, who's counting? And here's a quirky tidbit, in some regions, it was believed that the priest could actually control the weather. Seriously. Need rain for your crops? Just ask the priest to say a few extra prayers. Facing a drought? Well, maybe you haven't been giving enough to the church. Talk about job security. Can you imagine your boss giving you that kind of power? Hey, could you control the weather, and make sure it's sunny on Saturday? Thanks. Another thing to consider is the artwork inside the churches. We're talking about stained glass windows, depicting biblical scenes and the lives of the saints. We're talking about sculptures of Jesus, Mary, and a whole host of other holy figures. And we're talking about, sometimes, slightly terrifying depictions of hell. I mean, seriously, some of those medieval artists had a very vivid imagination. One shudders to think what bedtime stories they told their kids. And then, the demons rip out your soul and, sweet dreams. These images weren't just pretty decorations. They were teaching tools. Remember, most people couldn't read. So, these visual representations of religious stories were crucial for understanding the faith. It's like the medieval version of a graphic novel. Except, you know, painted on glass and stone. The church also played a huge role in regulating social behavior. It set the rules for marriage, condemned various sins, especially the fun ones, and generally tried to keep people from, well, you know, completely losing it. This didn't always work, of course. Medieval people were still people, with all the usual human failings. But the church provided a framework for morality and a constant reminder of the consequences of straying from the righteous path. Think of it as the original, cancel culture. Historians still debate the extent to which the church's moral authority was actually effective. Did people genuinely change their behavior because of religious teachings? Or did they just pay lip service to the church while continuing to indulge in all sorts of sinful activities? It's a tough question to answer. After all, human nature hasn't exactly changed much in the last 1,000 years. We're still struggling with the same temptations and moral dilemmas. The only difference is, now we have the internet to document our failures. Yay! And let's not forget about pilgrimages. These were long, often arduous journeys to holy sites, like Rome, Jerusalem, or the shrine of some local saint. People went on pilgrimages for all sorts of reasons, to seek forgiveness for their sins, to ask for healing, or simply to experience something new. It's like the medieval version of backpacking through Europe. Except, with a lot more praying and a lot less showering. One slightly less pious reason to embark on a pilgrimage. To get out of town for a while. Seriously. If you were bored with village life, or if you were trying to escape some sort of sticky situation, a pilgrimage was the perfect excuse to hit the road. Just tell everyone you're seeking spiritual enlightenment, and nobody will ask too many questions. It's the medieval equivalent of a finding myself trip. So, there you have it. A quick, and hopefully not too boring, glimpse into the world of the medieval church. It was a powerful, complex, and often contradictory institution that shaped every aspect of medieval life. And while we might not agree with everything they did, there's no denying the profound impact it had on the course of history. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I need a nap. All this talk of religion has made me strangely sleepy. And maybe a little bit hungry. Does anyone have any medieval ale? You trudge through the throng, the sheer volume of humanity a warm, slightly fragrant blanket, mostly fragrant of wood smoke and unwashed linen, if we're being honest. The sun beats down on your head, filtered slightly by the haphazard awning of woven reed strung overhead. It's market day. Every town, every city, every self-respecting collection of huts seems to have one. A designated day of organized chaos, a collective exhale after a week of labor, and a collective inhale of, commerce. You can practically taste the energy in the air, a palpable buzz of bartering and banter. This isn't some sterile, modern supermarket experience. Oh no. This is raw, unfiltered, transactional. Think less, swipe your rewards card, and more, I'll give you a prize-winning gourd for your daughter's hand in marriage, kidding, mostly. The sounds alone are a symphony of the senses. The bleating of goats vying for your attention, the hawkers shouting the virtues of their wares, finest wool this side of the mountain. Or, get your lucky rabbit's foot, guaranteed to bring, approximately nothing. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, a merchant's dulcet tones trying to get his competitors' customers to visit his booth instead. You almost wonder if there are too many things happening at the same time. It is nearly overwhelming, but you can't help but soak it all in. Historians still argue whether these marketplaces were truly egalitarian spaces, where anyone could rise in fortune, or simply another mechanism for the wealthy to consolidate their power. Probably a bit of both, honestly. Just like that organic label on your groceries back home. That woman over there, perched precariously on a stack of woven baskets, is selling, well, you're not entirely sure. Some kind of dried fungus, perhaps. Or maybe those are just really, really ugly potatoes. Whatever it is, she's hawking it with the zeal of a televangelist. You can tell she's good at what she does. You are almost drawn over to her but decide to keep moving. You move deeper into the market. The smells intensify. Roasted meats mingle with the earthy aroma of freshly dug vegetables. The sweet, almost cloying scent of honey competes with the pungent odor of, is that fish? Probably best not to ask how long it's been sitting out in this heat. You sidestep a particularly aggressive chicken, pecking furiously at a stray grain of something. The chickens here have a certain attitude. You wouldn't want to meet one in a dark alley. Did you know that in some ancient cultures, chickens were actually revered as sacred animals? Not just for their eggs or their flavor, but for their supposed ability to predict the future. Apparently, the way they pecked at grain could reveal auspicious or inauspicious omens. Imagine relying on a chicken to make your investment decisions. Okay, Clucky, should I buy low or sell high? not sure how that financial strategy would work out. You pass a stall overflowing with brightly colored fabrics. Silk from the east, linen from the local weavers, wool dyed in a rainbow of hues. You run your fingers over a bolt of deep indigo, feeling the intricate texture of the weave. It's beautiful, no doubt. But you can already imagine the moths having a field day with it. Then you see a stall piled high with pottery. Simple earthenware bowls, ornate vases, intricately carved figurines. The artisan, a wizened old man with hands gnarled like ancient roots, watches you with shrewd eyes. You pick up a small, unassuming bowl, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. It's surprisingly lightweight, yet feels incredibly sturdy. He nods approvingly. Good choice, he rasps, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Made with clay from the sacred river. Sacred river, huh? You murmur, turning the bowl over in your hands. Aye, he says, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Dip your toes in it, and you'll grow an extra toe. Or so the legend goes. You chuckle. I think I'll pass on the extra toe. You trade a handful of coins for the bowl, feeling a strange connection to the object, to the artisan, to the history embedded within its clay. It's a tangible piece of this world, a souvenir that goes beyond the gaudy plastic trinkets you might find in a modern tourist trap. Historians debate the role of artisans in ancient societies. Were they merely skilled laborers, or did they hold a more esteemed position, akin to artists? The answer, no doubt, varies depending on the culture and the time period. You move on, weaving your way through the ever-thickening crowd. You see a group of children gathered around a storyteller, his voice booming with tales of dragons and heroes. You pause for a moment, captivated by the sheer power of his words, the way he holds his audience spellbound. Remember that time you told a story at a party and everyone just started checking their phones? Yeah, me too. Then you see something that truly catches your eye. A stall tucked away in a quiet corner, displaying a collection of, well, it's hard to describe. Strange, otherworldly objects, crafted from materials you've never seen before. Polished stones that seem to glow from within, intricate metalwork that defies gravity, feathers that shimmer with iridescent colors. The proprietor, a woman with eyes as dark and knowing as a moonless night, smiles enigmatically. Welcome, she whispers, her voice like the soft rustle of silk. I have something for everyone. You browse her wares, mesmerized by their sheer strangeness. You pick up a small, oddly shaped stone, feeling a faint tingling sensation in your fingertips. What is this, you ask, your voice barely a whisper. A dream stone, she replies, her eyes twinkling. Hold it close as you sleep, and it will guide you through the labyrinth of your subconscious. You raise an eyebrow. So, it's like a psychic GPS. She laughs softly. You could say that. Or it could just be a pretty rock. It all depends on what you believe. You consider buying it. After all, who couldn't use a little guidance through the labyrinth of their subconscious? On the other hand, you're pretty sure you left your credit card back in your own time. Then, you spot something that really makes you pause. It's an old, leather-bound book. The cover is worn and faded, the pages yellowed with age. But something about it draws you in. You pick it up, carefully opening it to the first page. The script is elegant, flowing, almost like calligraphy. You can't read a single word. The proprietor notices your interest. That, she says, is a book of secrets. Secrets, you echo, intrigued. I, she says with a smile. Secrets of the past, secrets of the future, secrets of the universe. All waiting to be unlocked. You flip through the pages, mesmerized by the strange symbols and diagrams. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. You wonder who wrote it, and what secrets it holds. Apparently, there was a time when books themselves were seen as objects of immense power and mystique. The ability to read and write was a rare and valuable skill, and books were often treated as sacred objects, repositories of knowledge and wisdom. Now you just toss them on the floor next to your bed. How far we have fallen. The crowd presses in around you, the noise and the smells intensifying. You realize you've been wandering around for hours, lost in the sensory overload of the marketplace. You start to feel tired, a little overwhelmed. Maybe it's time to head back. Besides, you're starting to develop a serious craving for a shower and a nap. As you begin to turn to leave, you suddenly hear your name called out, faint but distinct, and you are sure you know the voice, or do you? Alright, settle in, pull that blanket up a little higher, we're going on a little trip. Back in time. Way back. Think mud, think questionable sanitation, think leeches. We're diving headfirst into healthcare in the Middle Ages, specifically the fascinating, often fragrant, and occasionally fatal world of herbal remedies. You trudge through a muddy medieval village, the air thick with the smells of wood smoke and something else. Something not quite right. Maybe it's the open sewer running down the center of the street, or maybe it's just the general ambience of a world where people bathe significantly less often than you do. You wrinkle your nose. It's definitely the sewer. A woman rushes past, clutching a small child wrapped in rough-spun wool. Her face is etched with worry. She's headed to the local wise woman, the village's equivalent of a pharmacist and general practitioner, all rolled into one surprisingly knowledgeable package. You follow, drawn by curiosity, and the faint, strangely comforting scent of herbs. Stepping inside the wise woman's hut is like stepping into another world. Sunlight filters through cracks in the thatched roof, illuminating shelves laden with dried plants, roots, and jars filled with mysterious concoctions. The air is thick with the aroma of lavender, rosemary, and something distinctly earthy. Think compost, but with purpose. You watch as the woman explains her child's ailment, a persistent cough and fever. The wise woman listens intently, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She examines the child, feeling his forehead, checking his tongue. Diagnosis time, and you're on the edge of your non-existent seat. She reaches for a mortar and pestle, and begins grinding dried thyme and elderflower. Time for that cough, she murmurs, perhaps not for the first time. The mainstream historical fact here is that herbalism formed the bedrock of medieval medicine, used far more extensively than the somewhat rare surgical or other advanced practices of the era. The remedy she's preparing is a simple infusion, designed to soothe the child's throat and help him breathe easier. She might also add a touch of honey, both for its antibacterial properties and, let's be honest, to make the medicine more palatable. No one wants to gag down something that tastes like dirt and despair. Okay, maybe some people do, but those people are weird. Medieval physicians, who were usually wealthy and educated men, relied heavily on texts by ancient Greek and Roman doctors like Galen and Hippocrates. These texts, often translated and reinterpreted by Arabic scholars, formed the basis of medical knowledge for centuries. Their approach was based on the theory of humors, the idea that the body was governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. An imbalance in these humors was believed to cause illness, and treatment aimed to restore equilibrium. So, if you were feeling a little too phlegmy, they might suggest a good bleed. Lovely. While the physicians focused on balancing humors, the wise women of the villages, often operating outside the official medical establishment, drew on generations of folk knowledge and practical experience with local herbs. They knew which plants grew where, when to harvest them, and how to prepare them for various ailments. They were the true herbalists, the keepers of the green flame. Now, for a quirky tidbit, did you know that mandrake root was believed to shriek when pulled from the ground? And that hearing this shriek could drive you mad, or even kill you. So, naturally, medieval herbalists developed elaborate rituals for harvesting mandrake, often involving dogs, ropes, and a healthy dose of courage, or, more likely, fear-fueled desperation. Imagine the conversation: "Okay, Fido, here's the plan. You yank the mandrake out. If you die, I owe you a bone. If I die, well, it won't matter, will it?" As the wise woman continues to work, you notice a jar filled with a dark, sticky substance. It smells faintly of honey and something else, something pungent and unfamiliar. You ask her what it is. That, she says, her voice low, is unguent. Unguent, in medieval terms, could mean a lot of things. It could be a simple salve made from beeswax and herbs, used to soothe burns and skin irritations. Or it could be something far more potent, and perhaps even, hallucinogenic. Some historians theorize that certain unguents contained ingredients that, when applied to the skin, could induce altered states of consciousness, leading to visions and, well, let's just say experiences that might have been interpreted as witchcraft. Historians still argue whether these unguents were deliberately used for ritualistic purposes, or whether their effects were simply accidental side effects of the ingredients. The wise woman smiles, a knowing glint in her eyes. It is used for special purposes, she says cryptically. You decide not to press the issue. You're not entirely sure you want to know what special purposes entail. Probably best to just stick to the thyme and honey. Speaking of thyme, the mainstream historical fact is that many of the herbs used in medieval remedies are still used today, both in traditional medicine and in modern pharmaceuticals. Herbs like chamomile, lavender, and peppermint have well-documented medicinal properties, and have been used for centuries to treat a variety of ailments. So, that cup of chamomile tea you drink before bed? You're participating in a tradition that stretches back centuries. Congratulations, you're officially medieval. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses, though roses were, in fact, used medicinally. Medieval medicine was often a gamble. Without the scientific understanding of disease that we have today, treatments were often based on guesswork, superstition, and the limited knowledge of the time. A concoction that worked for one person might have no effect on another, or even make them worse. And, let's be honest, a lot of the remedies probably tasted absolutely horrendous. Imagine forcing a sick child to swallow a spoonful of something that smells like badger and tastes like despair. It's a wonder anyone survived. You watch as the wise woman hands the woman the prepared infusion, along with instructions for its use. She also gives her a small pouch filled with dried lavender, to be placed under the child's pillow to promote restful sleep. The woman thanks her profusely, offering a handful of freshly laid eggs in return. Bartering was the name of the game back then. Forget credit cards, the currency of the realm was chickens and root vegetables. Before you leave, your attention is drawn to a curious contraption hanging from the ceiling, a bunch of dried onions tied together with string. You raise an eyebrow. Onions, you ask. The wise woman nods. To ward off the plague, she explains. You blink. Onions? Really? Well, okay. You see, the quirky, fringe tidbit here is that people believed that strong-smelling substances could ward off disease. The theory was that the plague, which was believed to be caused by bad air, miasma, could be repelled by equally bad, but hopefully less deadly, smells. Hence the onions, the burning of incense, and the general tendency of medieval people to smell interesting. You suddenly feel a little grateful for your modern-day hand sanitizer. As you leave the wise woman's hut, you ponder the complexities of medieval healthcare. It was a world of limited knowledge, superstition, and often brutal realities. Yet, it was also a world of ingenuity, resilience, and a deep connection to the natural world. The wise women and herbalists of the Middle Ages may not have had the benefit of modern medicine, but they did have a wealth of knowledge passed down through generations, and a determination to care for their communities. One last thought. They were making medicine from plants they picked in the forest. You buy medicine that had to be built in some clean room somewhere. Who exactly do you think is better at natural healthcare? Now, it's time for you to get some rest. Sweet dreams, and try not to dream about shrieking mandrakes. And maybe, just maybe, consider planting some lavender in your garden. You never know when you might need it. Good night, and sleep tight. Don't let the medieval bedbugs bite. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about fun. Or, well, their idea of fun, back in the day. After all that back-breaking labor, those endless days tilling fields or hauling coal, people needed a break. You trudge home, muscles aching, sweat stinging your eyes. Dinner is, whatever it is. You're exhausted. But then, maybe, just maybe, there's a chance for a bit of leisure. What does that look like? Well, for starters, forget Netflix and chill. Remember, this is a world without electricity for most, so your entertainment options are a tad rustic. Think more along the lines of storytelling around a crackling fire. Imagine the scent of wood smoke, the flickering shadows dancing on the faces gathered around, the low murmur of voices weaving tales of brave knights, mischievous fairies, or just plain gossip about old Mrs. Higgins down the lane. You listen, captivated, even though you've probably heard the story a dozen times before. It's the company, the shared experience, that matters. This was particularly true during long winters, where social interaction was vital to survival, both physically and mentally. Of course, storytelling wasn't the only option. Music played a huge role. Think fiddles, flutes, maybe even a slightly out-of-tune hurdy-gurdy, if you were lucky. You might find yourself at a local pub, or maybe someone's barn, for a good old-fashioned dance. Everyone's clapping, stomping, swirling each other around, maybe a little bit tipsy from some home-brewed ale. It's a simple pleasure, but a vital one. A chance to forget the drudgery of daily life, even if only for a few hours. And the best part? Absolutely zero chance of getting caught on camera doing something embarrassing that will haunt you forever. Take that, TikTok. Believe it or not, gambling also provided a form of entertainment, albeit a risky one. Card games, dice, cockfights, you name it. While some did have the money to gamble, for most, these activities were restricted to special occasions. And speaking of cockfights, historians still argue whether the popularity stemmed from genuine bloodlust, or whether it was a more complex social ritual that involved gambling and social bonding. Maybe it was a bit of both. Maybe they just really liked watching roosters try to kill each other. I guess if you are a farmer, raising and gambling fowl makes sense. Then there were the seasonal festivals and celebrations. Think May Day, with its flower garlands and maypole dances. Or harvest festivals, celebrating the bounty of the land. These were often the highlights of the year, a chance for the whole community to come together, feast, and celebrate life. These celebrations were often tied to agricultural cycles, and some, like Halloween, had their roots in ancient pagan traditions. Historians also believe many of these festivals were an opportunity to relax social norms, allowing for behaviors that were usually frowned upon. I bet that was a good time. For those who were more inclined toward intellectual pursuits, reading offered another escape. But bear in mind, books were expensive and literacy wasn't exactly widespread, so this was a leisure activity enjoyed by a much smaller segment of the population. If you were one of the lucky few who could read, you might lose yourself in tales of adventure, romance, or historical accounts. You could also get a job as the town's news reader, back when the news was printed on broadsides and yelled for all to hear. Think of it, you get paid to read, and everybody has to listen. That's basically a medieval influencer. Even simple things like going for a walk in the countryside could be considered leisure. A chance to escape the noise and smells of the village or town, to breathe in the fresh air, and appreciate the beauty of nature. This, of course, assumes you weren't too busy actually working in the countryside. Also, you had to be careful not to get mugged. Or worse, lost. I'm going to be honest, I'd probably get lost. Now, here's a slightly stranger tidbit, animal trials. Yes, you heard that right. In some parts of Europe, animals accused of crimes, from pigs that had killed children to swarms of insects that had ravaged crops, were actually put on trial. They would be formally charged, defended by lawyers, and even sentenced. The sentences were normally pretty harsh, because it is difficult to appeal to a brick wall. I think it's safe to say this wouldn't exactly fly in modern courtrooms. Although, imagine the chaos if we started prosecuting squirrels for stealing birdseed. Of course, what constituted leisure varied greatly depending on your social class. The wealthy had access to much more elaborate forms of entertainment, such as hunting, attending plays, or hosting lavish parties. They also had more free time to pursue hobbies, such as painting, playing musical instruments, or collecting exotic artifacts. So, if you were born into the aristocracy, your idea of a hard day might involve deciding which of your horses to ride, or which type of wine to serve at your dinner party. Meanwhile, for the peasantry, leisure was a rare and precious commodity, squeezed in between the demands of survival. Oh, to be a lord! One of the more curious pastimes of the wealthy was the creation of cabinets of curiosities, or wonder rooms. These were essentially private museums filled with a bizarre assortment of objects from around the world, stuffed animals, exotic plants, ancient artifacts, and other oddities. Imagine a Victorian-era version of Ripley's Believe It or Not, but crammed into someone's drawing room. These collections were often used to impress guests and demonstrate the owner's wealth and knowledge. And I have to imagine, they made dusting day a real nightmare. Now, let's briefly talk about public executions. Morbid, yes, but also a form of public spectacle that drew large crowds. People would come from miles around to witness the execution of criminals, and it was often seen as a festive occasion, with food vendors, entertainers, and even souvenirs for sale. You have to wonder what those souvenirs looked like. Maybe they were selling miniature guillotines. Get your very own guillotine. Perfect for taking the crusts off your bread. Anyway, these events served as a reminder of the power of the state and the consequences of breaking the law. It also sounds incredibly unsettling, to say the least. Moving away from the grim, let's delve into the world of traveling performers. These were the rock stars of their day. Think jesters, minstrels, acrobats, and puppet shows. They would travel from town to town, providing entertainment for the masses. Their performances were often a mix of humor, skill, and storytelling, and they were a welcome distraction from the everyday grind. Plus, if they were particularly good, you might even throw them a spare copper or two. It was a tough life, but hey, at least they got to see the world. And probably avoid manual labor. Here's something else that might surprise you: elaborate ice sculptures. During the winter months, wealthy patrons would commission artists to create intricate sculptures out of ice, sometimes on a massive scale. These frozen masterpieces would be displayed for a short time before melting away, a fleeting symbol of wealth and artistry. It's kind of beautiful, in a way. Like a really expensive, temporary snow globe. So, there you have it. A glimpse into the leisure activities of people from the past. It wasn't always glamorous, or even particularly relaxing, but it was a vital part of life. A way to escape the hardships, connect with others, and find moments of joy in a world that could often be harsh and unforgiving. And you know what? Even though their entertainment options were limited by our standards, I have a feeling they knew how to appreciate those rare moments of respite, maybe even more than we do today. After all, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? And if I'm being honest, no matter how much I love my comfy chair and video games, sometimes I wonder if we've lost something in our constant pursuit of entertainment. Maybe a little bit of simple, shared joy. And that's something to think about, isn't it? Now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to go try and carve a duck out of an ice cube. Wish me luck. I will need it. Okay, settle in, grab your favorite blanket, maybe a cup of chamomile tea. Let's drift into the wonderful world of family. Not your family, necessarily, unless you happen to be, say, a medieval peasant. Then this will be eerily relevant. You trudge home, the sunset painting the fields in hues of orange and purple that no digital filter can ever truly capture. Your stomach rumbles, a constant companion these days, and the familiar creak of your humble dwelling greets you like an old friend, a really old, slightly drafty, friend. Marriage. Ah, marriage. It's less about romance and more about, well, survival. You're likely betrothed young, maybe even before your body figures out all the weird things it's supposed to do. Love? Nice bonus, if it happens. More realistically, your union is a strategic alliance, patching together land, resources, or simply ensuring there's someone to help you drag those turnips out of the stubbornly resisting earth. It's a transaction, really, but one wrapped in the rituals and expectations of your community. The church, of course, has opinions. Lots of them. They're keen on making sure everything is done properly, which usually involves a priest, vows, and a whole lot of pronouncements about the sanctity of the union. Historians still argue whether the church's influence solidified marriage norms or merely formalized existing customs, but either way, they definitely got their 2 cents in. Your spouse, chosen more for their ability to wield a scythe than their sparkling personality, awaits you. You share a look, a silent understanding of the burdens you both carry. You might not be head over heels, but there's a certain comfort in knowing you're not alone in this. You know, companionship is vastly underrated, especially when battling rampant diseases, poor sanitation, and an alarming lack of decent dental care. Children. Oh, the children. They are, arguably, your primary purpose. Not to be morbid, but infant mortality is a real thing, a shadow that hangs over every birth. Every sniffle, every fever, sends a shiver of fear down your spine. You cradle your little ones close, offering what comfort you can, knowing full well that fate can be capricious. You spend a lot of time praying. The concept of helicopter parenting is non-existent. You're too busy just trying to keep them alive. They learn to help early, mimicking your every move. The boys will likely follow in your footsteps, learning the ways of the field or the craft. The girls will learn the domestic arts, ensuring the smooth running of the household. There's no time for abstract pondering. Unless your kids are particularly gifted at pondering the insides of a well. Then you have to worry about that too. Society's expectations weigh heavily. Everyone has a role to play. You're not an individual, you're part of a community, a cog in a very large, very rusty, machine. Gossip swirls around you like dust devils, judging every action, every word. Fail to meet expectations, and you risk ostracism, even destitution. It's basically medieval social media, except the comments section has pointy sticks. You eat your meager dinner, a thin gruel, perhaps some bread, maybe a bit of cheese if you're lucky. Meat is a rare treat, reserved for special occasions. You chew slowly, savoring each bite. Life is simple, hard, and often unforgiving. But there's a strange beauty to it all. A sense of connection to the land, to your family, to the rhythms of the seasons. A simplicity that modern life, with its infinite choices and endless distractions, often lacks. Now, let's skip over to, say, Victorian England, just for a change of pace. Picture this, you're not tilling fields, but navigating the intricate social landscape of London society. Marriage is still important, but now it's about more than just survival. It's about social standing, wealth, and securing your family's future. Love? Still a bonus, but a much bigger bonus. It's like the lottery, everyone hopes to win, but they're prepared to settle for a hefty consolation prize. The Industrial Revolution has changed everything. Cities are growing, factories are booming, and social mobility is, theoretically possible. You might be the daughter of a successful merchant, dreaming of marrying into the aristocracy. Or you might be a young man striving to climb the ladder of success, hoping to secure a wealthy bride who can provide the capital you need to start your own business. Either way, marriage is a key ingredient in your grand plan. Courtship is a delicate dance, a carefully choreographed performance. Letters are exchanged, visits are paid, and chaperones are always present, ensuring that propriety is maintained. A stolen glance, a whispered word, can convey volumes. It's a game of subtle hints and unspoken desires, a world away from the directness of modern dating apps. Dating apps during this time period would have just been classified as illicit behavior. Queen Victoria, the embodiment of Victorian morality, sets the tone. Family values are paramount. The home is a haven, a refuge from the harsh realities of the industrial world. Children are cherished, though still expected to be seen and not heard, unless they're playing the piano, then everyone wants to hear them. The concept of childhood as a distinct stage of life is gaining traction, leading to new approaches to education and child-rearing. But beneath the veneer of respectability, things are not always as they seem. Poverty is rampant, prostitution is widespread, and social inequality is stark. The rigid social structure can be suffocating, especially for women, who are often confined to the domestic sphere, their ambitions stifled by societal expectations. You might be a governess, struggling to make ends meet while navigating the complexities of a wealthy household. Or you might be a seamstress, toiling away in a sweatshop, dreaming of a better life. You are one hard crinoline skirt away from madness. Obligations abound. To your family, to your social class, to your nation. You are expected to uphold certain standards, to conform to certain norms. Individuality is discouraged, conformity is rewarded. There are entire books about proper etiquette, navigating calling cards, and folding napkins. Historians still argue about how strictly these etiquette rules were followed, but it's clear they were supposed to be. The pressure to conform can be immense, especially for women. They can't do banking, or own property, or vote, so their whole fate is in the hands of others. Let's spin the globe again. Zoom. We're in a pre-colonial African society, say, amongst the Igbo people of Nigeria. Here, family isn't just about the nuclear unit, it's about the extended family, the clan, the community. Your identity is inextricably linked to your lineage, your ancestors, your place within the social hierarchy. Marriage is a bond between families, a way to strengthen alliances and ensure the continuity of the lineage. You are raised within a complex system of kinship and obligation. Respect for elders is paramount. Children are taught to honor their ancestors, to uphold the traditions of their people. The community raises the children, everyone feels they have skin in the game. Marriage is a process, not a single event. It involves negotiations, ceremonies, and the exchange of gifts. Bride wealth, a payment made by the groom's family to the bride's family, is often involved, symbolizing the transfer of the woman's labor and reproductive potential to the groom's lineage. Polygamy is common, especially for men of status. A man's wealth and influence are often measured by the number of wives and children he has. Children are highly valued, seen as a blessing from the gods. They are the future of the lineage, the carriers of tradition. They are taught to respect the earth, to honor the spirits, to live in harmony with nature. Education is largely informal, passed down through oral tradition, storytelling, and practical training. This is how they came up with the original dad joke. Obligations are reciprocal. You are expected to care for your elders, to support your siblings, to contribute to the well-being of the community. There is a strong sense of collective responsibility, a belief that everyone has a role to play in maintaining the social order. Disputes are resolved through communal gatherings, where elders mediate and seek consensus. The community is all about compromise and respect. Society is structured around age grades and titles, which confer status and responsibility. Men and women progress through these ranks, gaining influence and authority as they age. The ancestors are ever present, their spirits guiding and influencing the lives of the living. Divination and ritual play a key role in maintaining balance and harmony. And that's all of human history tied up in a bow for your sleepy brain. Sweet dreams. Okay, settle in, settle in. Let's talk about justice, or rather, the sometimes not so just systems designed to, keep us all from going full Mad Max on each other. Specifically, we're dipping our toes into the murky waters of crime and punishment in history. And trust me, some of these historical punishments were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly restorative justice circles. You trudge through the heavy oak doors of the courthouse. The air inside is thick with the smell of old paper, stale coffee, and simmering anxiety. Sunlight filters weakly through the grime-coated windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. You can almost taste the collective nervousness of everyone present, a metallic tang on your tongue. It's a familiar scene, perhaps, drawn from countless films and documentaries. But this time, it's different. This time, you're the one standing trial. The charge? Well, let's just say it involved a particularly stubborn goose, a questionable interpretation of property law, and an unfortunate incident with a bucket of something. Okay, fine, it was you who may or may not have accidentally tripped and sent a bucket of particularly fragrant manure cascading onto the mayor's prized poultry. Look, accidents happen. And geese are notoriously territorial. Anyway, here you are, facing the full force of the legal system. Or, at least, a version of it. Because the justice you're about to encounter depends entirely on when and where you happen to be standing. Prepare yourself. Imagine, for a moment, that you are instead standing in ancient Mesopotamia, roughly 1754 BC. Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, is in charge. And Hammurabi, bless his cotton socks, was very keen on rules. He literally had them carved into a giant stone pillar, the famous Code of Hammurabi. An eye for an eye, that kind of thing. A bit literal, perhaps. Did you steal someone's sheep? Prepare to lose a sheep. Or maybe a finger. Depending on the judge's mood, probably. Now, the key thing about the Code of Hammurabi is that it wasn't exactly applied equally. Your social standing mattered. If you, a commoner, gouged out the eye of a nobleman, your eye was definitely going bye-bye. But if a nobleman accidentally blinded you, well, maybe he'd just have to pay a small fine. Historians still argue whether Hammurabi's code was genuinely designed to create a fairer society or simply to reinforce the existing power structures. But one thing is for sure, it wasn't exactly sunshine and rainbows. Oh, and one slightly quirky tidbit about ancient Babylonian law. If a builder constructed a house that collapsed and killed the owner, the builder would be put to death. Not just a fine, mind you. Straight to the afterlife. Talk about job security. Nowadays, you just get a strongly worded letter from the Homeowners Association. Progress, maybe. Back in the courthouse, the prosecutor clears his throat, pulling you back to the present. Or, maybe not. Let's hop on over to medieval Europe for a bit. Specifically, to England. It's the 13th century. You've been accused of witchcraft. Which, in your case, means you know a bit about herbal remedies and have a slightly unconventional cat. Turns out, that's enough to get you in serious trouble. The trial is a kangaroo court, to put it mildly. The judge is convinced you're in league with the devil. The evidence? Well, you can't recite the Lord's Prayer perfectly, and your cat keeps staring intensely at the village idiot. Case closed. Time for a swim. The famous swimming test for witches was a delightful little practice where you were tied up and thrown into a body of water. If you floated, it was proof of your guilt. Why? Because pure water, supposedly, would reject someone tainted by evil. If you sank, you were innocent. Of course, you were also probably dead. Win-win, right? Oh, and if you survived, then the authorities were free to kill you anyway. One might argue that this was an incentive to become skilled at holding your breath. While the witch trials are often associated with the Salem witch trials in the 17th century, they were rampant in Europe for centuries. King James I of England, before he was King of England, was particularly obsessed with witchcraft and wrote a whole book on the subject, Demonology. He was convinced that witches were trying to sink his ship, and honestly, you can't argue with that kind of logic, can you? Historians still debate the precise number of people executed for witchcraft, but it's estimated to be tens of thousands across Europe. A grim reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and religious extremism. The banging of a gavel startles you again. Back to the courthouse. The goose incident seems almost quaint compared to burning at the stake. Almost. The prosecutor is droning on about the egregious nature of your crime and the potential for further poultry-related offenses. Let's escape this monotonous drone for a moment and head to Japan. Specifically, the Edo period, 1603 to 1868. Here, justice was swift, often brutal, and deeply tied to social hierarchy. Samurai, for example, had the right to summarily execute commoners for perceived disrespect, which could include anything from accidentally bumping into them to not bowing deeply enough. Talk about a bad day. One particularly interesting, if gruesome, form of punishment was called seppuku, or ritual suicide. This was reserved primarily for samurai as a way to restore their honor after committing a crime or failing in their duty. It involved disembowelment with a sword, often followed by beheading by a designated assistant. Charming. And here's a quirky fact: sometimes, criminals were punished by having their faces tattooed. This was a permanent mark of shame, making it difficult for them to reintegrate into society. One area even used different tattoos depending on how many times one offended. The first offense might be a line, the second another. 3 meant a completed character. 4, dog. Historians still ponder the motivations behind these harsh punishments in Edo Japan. Were they intended to deter crime, maintain social order, or simply reinforce the power of the ruling elite? Perhaps a bit of all 3. The prosecutor's voice rises in intensity. He's now waving a picture of the manure-covered mayor in your face. Your stomach churns. This is not going well. Okay, deep breaths. One more escape. Let's time travel to revolutionary France. The year is 1793. The Reign of Terror is in full swing. And the preferred method of dispensing justice is the guillotine. Invented, ironically, as a more humane form of execution, compared to, say, hanging or drawing and quartering, the guillotine became a symbol of the French Revolution's bloody excesses. Robespierre, the leader of the Committee of Public Safety, was a big fan. He believed that executing enemies of the revolution was the only way to ensure its survival. And he wasn't shy about using the guillotine. Thousands of people, including King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, met their end under the blade. Now, here's a slightly macabre tidbit. People wondered if the head retained consciousness after being separated from the body. There are accounts of witnesses claiming that the eyes of severed heads blinked or even seemed to follow movement. Creepy, right? The science says no, but the stories persist. And, something many people are not aware of is that France had a widow's machine up until 1977, when it was last used. Historians still debate the extent to which the Reign of Terror was a necessary evil or a descent into totalitarianism. Did it save the revolution, or did it ultimately undermine its ideals? The judge's voice booms through the courthouse. Silence. The court is now in session. You snap back to reality. The goose. The manure. The mayor's rage. It all comes rushing back. The judge looks down at you, his face grim. Guilty as charged. For your egregious crime against the dignity of the municipality and the mayor's prized poultry, I sentence you to community service. 100 hours of cleaning up after the annual goose parade. Wait, what? Community service? That's it? After all that historical doom and gloom, all those images of beheadings and witch trials, you're getting community service. You blink in disbelief. Maybe, just maybe, justice isn't always harsh. Maybe sometimes, it's just mildly inconvenient. But as you leave the courthouse, you can't help but wonder, what kind of protective gear will you be issued for the goose parade cleanup? Because those birds can be mean. And you still think the mayor's a pompous, well, never you mind. Nighty-night. Okay, settle in, settle in. Let's talk about something relaxing. War. Specifically, the constant, looming threat of it. Because, honestly, isn't that the most soothing topic imaginable? Just picture it, you trudge through the muddy fields, the weight of your existence pressing down with every step. The sky is a dull, bruised purple, threatening rain. You're tired. So tired. Every muscle aches, and the smell of wood smoke and, well, unwashed humanity, clings to everything. Welcome to basically any pre-industrial era, ever. You might be thinking, hey, wasn't it just peasants tilling fields and happy little villages? And sure, sometimes it was. Like, on Tuesdays. But for the rest of the week, there was a pretty good chance someone was planning to relieve you of your stuff. Or your life. Mostly your stuff, though. Lives are messy. So, you trudge onward. Your village, a collection of wattle and daub huts, is surrounded by a flimsy wooden palisade. This, you hope, will deter roving bands of, well, whoever's feeling peckish that day. Maybe it's a neighboring lord with a grievance over a stray chicken. Maybe it's a raiding party from across the border, looking for loot and slaves. Or maybe it's just Bob from down the road, who's had a particularly bad harvest and figures you owe him. Resource management was rarely done well. The air is thick with tension. You can feel it like a physical weight, settling in your stomach and tightening your chest. You glance nervously at the horizon, half expecting to see a plume of smoke rising in the distance, the telltale sign of another village burning. It's probably just Agnes burning her toast again, but you can't be too careful. You remember your grandpappy's words, always expect the worst, that way you're either right or pleasantly surprised. He was a charmer, that one. You quicken your pace, eager to get back within the relative safety of the village walls. You notice old Martha is selling her wares. Hey, Martha, you cry. How's business? Quiet, she says. Too quiet. You offer a sympathetic grimace and stroll on. As you approach the village, you see a few of the younger men practicing with spears in the training yard, their faces grim and determined. Bless their hearts. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly as defenseless as often portrayed, or if they formed surprisingly effective militia units when properly motivated. Let's just say, you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a pitchfork wielded by a group of angry farmers who've just had their crops stolen. The pitchfork is surprisingly versatile as a weapon. In fact, many ancient cultures had a deity who was symbolized by a pitchfork, trident, or some other kind of pointy-ended stick. Suddenly, a shout rings out from the watchtower. Riders! Riders approaching from the east. Your heart leaps into your throat. This isn't Agnes burning toast. You sprint towards the village gate, joining the throng of people scrambling for safety. The gate creaks shut with a resounding thud, the heavy wooden beams falling into place with a finality that sends a shiver down your spine. You huddle inside, listening to the frantic cries and prayers. You clutch your lucky rabbit's foot, not that it's ever done you much good, but hey, it makes you feel better. The riders are close now, you can hear the thunder of hooves and the shouts of the attackers. They circle the village, assessing its defenses, looking for a weak point. They're like vultures, you think, circling a dying animal. Then, the first volley of arrows rains down. You duck behind a stack of hay bales, the sound of the arrows thudding into the wood around you like a macabre lullaby. The defenders return fire, their arrows whistling back into the fray. A scream pierces the air, someone has been hit. Your stomach churns. The attack continues for what feels like an eternity. The attackers try to breach the gate, battering it with a makeshift ram. The defenders pour boiling water and pitch over the walls, repelling the assault. You close your eyes, praying for it all to end. You think back to yesterday's harvest festival when you took a sip of mead. Oh, how you wished you saved it. Finally, just as you're starting to think your eardrums will explode, the attackers break off the assault. They've decided the village isn't worth the trouble, at least for now. They gather their dead and wounded and ride off into the distance, leaving behind a trail of smoke and destruction. And probably some very upset chickens. You emerge from your hiding place, your body trembling. The village is a mess. The gate is splintered, several huts are on fire, and the air is thick with the smell of smoke and blood. You see bodies lying on the ground, both attackers and defenders. Some are still moving, moaning in pain. The villagers begin to tend to the wounded, putting out the fires, and burying the dead. You join them, your movements automatic, your mind numb. You've survived another raid. But you know it won't be the last. The threat of war is always there, hanging over your head like a sword of Damocles. You find a quiet corner and sit down, your head in your hands. You close your eyes and try to imagine a world without war, a world where people live in peace and harmony. But it's just a dream. A silly little dream. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. The village slowly recovers from the raid. The gate is repaired, the huts are rebuilt, and the fields are replanted. But the scars remain. The fear lingers in the air, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. You spend your days working in the fields, trying to forget the horrors you've witnessed. But the memories keep creeping back, like unwelcome guests. You see the faces of the dead in your dreams. You hear the screams of the wounded in your sleep. One day, you hear rumors of a larger army gathering nearby. A king is marching through the land, conquering territory and demanding tribute. The local lords are raising their banners and preparing for war. It's that time of the year again, it seems. You know that your village will be caught in the middle. You know that more bloodshed is inevitable. You wonder if you'll survive this time. You wonder if it's even worth trying. But you keep working. You keep planting. You keep hoping. Because what else can you do? You trudge along, pretending there is no war. You try to remember your childhood days when your biggest concern was catching tadpoles in the creek. You fail. The army arrives sooner than expected. You see them marching in the distance, a vast column of men and horses, their armor glinting in the sun. The sight is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It's a force of nature, unstoppable and unrelenting. The village is quickly overrun. The defenders put up a brave fight, but they are hopelessly outnumbered. The attackers slaughter them without mercy. You run. You flee into the forest, hoping to escape the carnage. You stumble through the trees, your breath coming in ragged gasps. You hear the screams of the dying echoing behind you. You don't look back. You run until you can't run anymore. You collapse on the ground, exhausted and terrified. You're alone. You're lost. You're probably going to die. This is it, you think. This is how it ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. Then, you hear a noise. A twig snapping nearby. You freeze, your heart pounding in your chest. You don't know who it is, but you know they're close. Slowly, cautiously, you raise your head. You squint into the darkness. And then, you see them. A group of other villagers, hiding in the trees. They beckon you to join them. You crawl towards them, relief washing over you. You're not alone after all. Together, you and the other villagers make your way deeper into the forest. You find a hidden cave and take shelter there. You share what little food you have. You comfort each other. You don't know what the future holds. But you know that you'll face it together. You'll survive. You'll rebuild. You'll never give up hope. Because that's what humans do. They endure. They adapt. They survive. And you'll probably tell the story to your grandpappy later on. It seems, he will be needing more material for when he plays card with his geriatric buds. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let your shoulders slump, your eyelids droop just a little. We're diving deep today. Forget doom scrolling, we're going medieval. We're talking castles, lords, and the whole shebang, power, hierarchy, and a glimpse into how unbelievably not equal things were back then. Imagine, just for a moment, the weight of wool. You feel it, right? It's scratchy, maybe a bit damp, clinging uncomfortably to your skin. That's your everyday attire, friend. No breathable cotton blends here. You're a peasant, and wool is luxury. Now, picture yourself trudging. Just, trudging. Through mud, through fields, under a sky that's always either drizzling or aggressively sunny. You're working the land, maybe for your own small plot, maybe for a lord. Depends on your luck, and your lineage. Your days are long. Really long. Like, sunrise to sunset long. And your diet? Well, let's just say, exciting isn't a word you'd use to describe it. Think gruel. Lots of gruel. Maybe some bread, if the harvest was good. Vegetables if you could grow them. Meat? A rare treat, usually reserved for special occasions, like when the Lord decides to share his kill from the hunt. And that, sharing, is probably just awful, let's be honest. Delicious. Now, your house. House might be a generous term. It's probably a one-room hut, made of wattle and daub, basically, woven sticks plastered with mud. Cozy. And you're sharing it with your family, maybe some livestock, and definitely some rodents. Think of it as rustic chic, very on trend right now. Historians still argue whether peasant life was truly as uniformly bleak as some accounts suggest, or if there were pockets of relative comfort and even joy. But, probably mostly bleak. Speaking of lords, let's swing over to the other end of the social ladder. You see that imposing structure looming on the horizon? That's a castle, baby. Not the cute, Disney-fied version. This is a serious fortress, designed to keep people out and those inside very, very safe. Now, it isn't all safety and security. Let's not forget, castles were often incredibly drafty. I mean, stone walls, minimal insulation. You're basically living in a refrigerator most of the year. But at least it's a refrigerator with tapestries and servants. And lords? They didn't exactly roll out of bed at 5 a.m. to till the fields. Their days were filled with, well, other things. Hunting, feasting, managing their lands, usually through someone else, and generally making sure everyone knew who was in charge. The lord of the manor was a pillar of society. They were responsible for the upkeep of infrastructure like roads and mills, maintaining a court, and even collecting taxes. You might imagine knights in shining armor at every corner in a medieval castle. Fun fact. The complete suit of plate armor that you see in movies was actually developed relatively late in the medieval period, around the 15th century. Earlier knights wore chainmail, which, while offering protection, was also incredibly heavy and probably smelled like a wet dog after a long battle. Life for a noble wasn't all wine and roses, though. There was constant pressure to maintain their status, to marry strategically, to produce heirs. And there was always the threat of war, of losing everything. So, downsides. Plus, those elaborate headdresses. Imagine the neck strain. And marriage? Oh, marriage was serious business. It wasn't about love, necessarily. It was about alliances, about securing land, about consolidating power. A noble marriage could make or break a family. Historians still argue whether the concept of courtly love, the idealized, often unattainable, romantic love that became popular in medieval literature, actually reflected real-life relationships, or if it was purely a literary construct. Personally, I reckon it was just a nice way to get away with writing about unrequited crushes. Now, let's talk about something really fun, tournaments. These were essentially medieval sporting events, where knights could show off their skills in jousting, sword fighting, and other manly pursuits. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of the Super Bowl, but with more horses and fewer commercials. And way more potential for accidental impalement. What's not to love? But not everyone was thrilled with the popularity of tournaments. The Catholic Church, for instance, often frowned upon them, viewing them as frivolous and potentially dangerous. They even threatened excommunication for those who participated. A lord was meant to be humble and pious. However, the lure of glory, and the chance to win some sweet prizes, was usually too strong to resist. Of course, alongside the grand tournaments and strategic marriages, there were other, less glamorous aspects of noble life. They had to deal with unruly tenants, crop failures, and the occasional plague outbreak. And then there was the problem of hygiene. Let's just say bathing wasn't exactly a daily occurrence. Perfume was their friend. Thank goodness we've moved on. There was also a strange, almost comical, belief among some nobles that bathing too often was actually bad for you. It was thought that water could weaken the body's defenses and make you more susceptible to illness. Which, ironically, probably contributed to the spread of illness. Anyway, maybe that's why they bathed once a year at most. Meanwhile, back on the farm, you're looking up at the castle. Maybe you're thinking about how unfair it all is. How you toil in the fields while the Lord feasts and hunts. How your children might never have a chance to escape their circumstances. Or maybe you're just thinking about how much your feet hurt. Because, honestly, that's probably what you're thinking about. But here's the thing, even in the starkest of hierarchies, there's always a bit of wiggle room. Peasants weren't just mindless drones. They had their own communities, their own traditions, their own ways of resisting the system. There were peasant revolts, small acts of defiance, and a quiet, simmering resentment that occasionally boiled over. You might be wondering about the weirdest food they ate in medieval times. Well, here's a fun fact for you. The elites loved lamprey pie. Yep, that eel-like fish, baked into a pie. King Henry I allegedly died from eating too much lamprey. Good to know that sometimes, even royalty can be felled by a questionable culinary choice. Now, you're probably feeling tired, right? I know I am. It's a lot to take in, all this history, all this social stratification. It's easy to romanticize the past, to imagine a simpler time, but the reality is often far more complex and, frankly, more unpleasant than we might like to think. And you might also be asking, were there female lords? Sort of. Noble women could inherit land and titles, but their power was often limited by social expectations and the need to marry strategically. But, you made it. You've imagined your way through the medieval world. You've tasted the gruel, felt the scratchy wool, and maybe even caught a glimpse of a knight jousting. You've explored the lives of the nobility and their stark difference to peasant life. So now, my friend, as you drift off to sleep, remember that even in the most unequal of societies, there's always a story to be told, always a perspective to be considered. Sweet dreams, of peasants and castles. Pleasant slumber. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's talk about something heavy. Like a 1,000-pound textbook left out in the rain. We're talking about death. And what, if anything, comes after. You trudge along this dusty road, the sun beating down. The air hangs thick and heavy, buzzing with unseen insects. You can feel the sweat trickling down your back, plastering your shirt to your skin. Each breath is a reminder, you're alive. But also, inevitably, you're not going to be alive forever. Cheerful, right? The idea of your own mortality is probably something you push to the back of your mind. Most people do. It's like that one chore you keep meaning to get to but never quite do. Oh, I'll clean the gutters, eventually. Oh, I'll contemplate my finite existence, someday. But here we are. You pause, wiping your brow. You notice a small, weathered headstone by the side of the road. Someone long gone. Their story, whatever it was, reduced to a name and a date. Kind of sobering. Makes you wonder what your epitaph will say. Hopefully something more exciting than, liked cats, hated Mondays. Throughout history, civilizations have grappled with this very question. The ancient Egyptians, for example, were obsessed with the afterlife. They mummified their pharaohs, filled their tombs with treasure, and even included instructions on how to navigate the underworld. Think of it as the ultimate pre-planning package. The sarcophagus was just the beginning. And honestly, all that gold seems a little excessive. Like, did they really need 3 solid gold toilet seats in the afterlife? Priorities. You reach out and touch the cool stone of the headstone. The air suddenly feels a bit cooler, too, like a gentle hand brushing against your skin. Probably just the wind, but you never know. You might be surprised to learn that some people actually practice dying. Seriously. There are meditation techniques and spiritual exercises designed to prepare you for the transition. It's like dress rehearsals for the ultimate performance. Imagine that resume: skills, expert at breathing. Proficient in accepting existential dread. Hobbies: planning my own funeral. Historians still argue whether the elaborate rituals surrounding death in ancient cultures were primarily driven by genuine spiritual beliefs or more pragmatic concerns, such as maintaining social order and reinforcing the power of the ruling class. Was it all about appeasing the gods? Or about keeping the peasants in line? Maybe it was a bit of both. You start walking again, the road stretching out before you. The landscape is desolate, almost lunar. Maybe this is what purgatory looks like. Just endless walking with mild sunstroke. Think about all the different ideas people have about what happens after death. Heaven, hell, reincarnation, oblivion. The list goes on. Each culture, each religion, has its own unique take. It's like everyone's trying to solve the same puzzle, but they're all using different pieces and different instruction manuals. There's that quirky fringe theory that suggests consciousness doesn't reside solely within the brain, but rather exists as a fundamental aspect of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. So when you die, your consciousness doesn't just disappear, it simply rejoins the cosmic soup. Maybe you become a star, a dust mote, or even, wait for it, a sentient houseplant. Okay, maybe not the houseplant. You stumble slightly, catching yourself on a nearby rock. You feel a sharp pain in your ankle. Ouch, you mutter. At least you know you're still alive. For now. The history of death rituals is fascinating, actually. Did you know that in some cultures, people used to hire professional mourners to wail and lament at funerals? Can you imagine that job? Talk about a career in the arts. You'd need some serious acting chops. And the Academy Award for Best Performance in a Funeral goes to Brenda, for her truly gut-wrenching sob. You press on, the sun beginning to dip lower in the sky. The shadows lengthen, stretching across the road like grasping fingers. You can almost feel the weight of all the lives that have come before you, all the deaths that have paved the way for your own fleeting existence. Consider near-death experiences. People who have been clinically dead and then revived often report similar experiences: a bright light, a sense of peace, a feeling of floating outside their bodies. Are these glimpses of the afterlife? Or simply the result of a brain shutting down under extreme stress? The debate rages on. You suddenly spot something in the distance. A small village, nestled in a valley. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, promising warmth and shelter. Maybe, just maybe, there's some hope after all. It reminds you of the Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico. Far from being a morbid occasion, it's a vibrant and joyous celebration of life and remembrance. Families build altars, decorate them with flowers and food, and share stories about their deceased loved ones. It's a way of keeping their memories alive, of bridging the gap between the living and the dead. It's also an excuse to eat a lot of sugar skulls. Priorities, people. Historians still argue whether these experiences are evidence of an actual afterlife or simply the product of the brain trying to make sense of a traumatic event. Maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe it's something more profound. Maybe it's just a really good hallucination. You quicken your pace, eager to reach the village. Your ankle throbs, but you ignore it. The promise of a warm bed and a hot meal is enough to keep you going. But still, the question lingers: what does happen after we die? It's a question that has plagued humanity for millennia, and probably will continue to do so. Maybe there's a grand cosmic plan. Maybe it's all just random chance. Maybe, it doesn't even matter. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? All this striving, all this worrying, all this planning, and for what? Maybe the meaning of life isn't to find the answer to the afterlife, but to embrace the present moment, to experience everything this world has to offer, and to make the most of the time we have. You finally reach the edge of the village, the sounds of laughter and music drifting on the breeze. The air smells of wood smoke and baking bread. It's a welcome change from the dusty road and the weight of existential dread. You take a deep breath and step forward, ready to face whatever lies ahead. Maybe the afterlife is a mystery. But the present? That's something you can experience, right now. So go experience it. And try not to think too much about the giant cosmic vacuum cleaner waiting to suck us all up. Okay? Okay. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk feasts. You trudge through the muddy streets, the aroma of roasting meat thick in the air, clinging to your tunic like a stubborn lint roller. It's feast day, again. Honestly, it feels like there's a feast every other week. Not that you're complaining, mind you. Free food is free food. You tighten the laces of your sandals, trying not to step in anything questionable. Today's celebration marks the end of the harvest, a fact you are keenly aware of, as it was you who spent the past month bent double in a field. You wipe a stray bead of sweat from your brow. Ah yes, the harvest. Glorious. The village square is already buzzing. Tables groan under the weight of bread, cheese, and, is that a roasted boar? Oh, someone went all out. You spot your friend, Elara, waving frantically from across the throng. She's managed to snag a prime spot near the meat barrel. Smart woman. You weave your way through the crowd, dodging children chasing stray dogs, who are, in turn, chasing scraps, and finally reach Elara. Took you long enough, she says, handing you a clay cup. They just tapped the good stuff. You take a long swig. Honeyed, slightly fermented, and definitely strong enough to make you forget you spent the last month wrestling turnips. Perfect. You're a lifesaver, you reply, already feeling your shoulders relax. These communal gatherings, these feasts, they weren't just about stuffing your face. Although, let's be honest, that was a major perk. They were the glue that held society together. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a company potluck, only with more potential for public drunkenness and less passive-aggressive office gossip. Actually, scratch that last part. There was plenty of gossip. Food, of course, was central. It's a universal language, after all. And in a time when daily life was a constant struggle for survival, a feast was a tangible demonstration of prosperity, a sign that the gods were smiling upon you. Or at least not actively raining locusts on your crops. Historians still argue whether the elaborate displays of food and drink were primarily about showing off wealth and power, or genuinely about sharing the bounty with the community. Probably a bit of both, really. Human nature hasn't changed that much, has it? It's like when your neighbor puts up those insane Christmas lights every year. Is it festive cheer or a subtle declaration of war on your own comparatively pathetic string of fairy lights? You just never know. While the basics, bread, meat, cheese, ale, were staples, the specific foods varied wildly depending on the region and time period. In ancient Rome, you might have found dormice stuffed with nuts, a delicacy that makes you thankful for the humble roast chicken. In medieval England, a suckling pig, complete with an apple in its mouth, was a common sight. Though, considering the price of pork, you think they probably just used an actual apple. The price of produce was steep in those days. And speaking of apples, did you know that in some cultures, throwing an apple at someone was a form of proposal? Like, a medieval version of swiping right. Imagine the awkwardness of accidentally braining your crush with a Granny Smith. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to nearly give you a concussion. Wanna get married? The feast wasn't just about the food, though. It was about the entertainment. There were jugglers, musicians, and storytellers. Bards would recite epic poems, recounting the deeds of heroes and gods. And, of course, there was dancing. Lots and lots of dancing. usually of the slightly uncoordinated, mead-fueled variety. You watch as a group of villagers form a circle, clapping and stomping their feet to the rhythm of a lute. Ilara nudges you. "Come on," she says. "Don't be a stick in the mud." You groan, but she drags you into the circle anyway. You try to mimic the steps, but your feet seem to have a mind of their own. You trip over your own feet, narrowly avoiding a collision with a rather large man holding a turkey leg. You mumble an apology and quickly retreat to the sidelines, your face burning. Dancing is definitely not your forte. You're better off sticking to the mead. These celebrations also served a vital social function. They were a chance for people to meet, to gossip, to forge alliances, and, yes, even to find a spouse. Marriages were often arranged during these gatherings, solidifying family ties and ensuring the continuation of the bloodline. Talk about a high-pressure networking event. You know what they say, never trust a person who wears a turtleneck to a village feast. And it wasn't just the living who were celebrated. Many feasts were dedicated to honoring the dead, remembering ancestors, and maintaining the connection between the present and the past. It was a reminder that you were part of something bigger than yourself, a link in a chain stretching back through generations. Kinda like how you're always having to fix your grandparents' VCR, even though you weren't even alive when the darn thing was new. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some cultures, it was believed that the spirits of the dead could actually attend these feasts, invisibly joining in the festivities. So, you might want to be extra polite to that empty chair next to you. You never know who might be sitting there. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the square, the feast shows no signs of slowing down. The music gets louder, the dancing gets more frenzied, and the mead continues to flow. You lean back against a tree, watching the scene unfold before you. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's loud, but it's also kind of beautiful. It's a reminder that even in the face of hardship, there is always room for joy, for celebration, and for connection. But let's face it, all this feasting has probably left you feeling a bit gassy. And that's where the garum comes in. Now, you're probably thinking, garum? What in the heck is garum? Well, my friend, garum was basically the ketchup of the ancient world. Except instead of tomatoes, it was made from fermented fish guts. Delicious, right? Surprisingly, it was a condiment of choice from ancient Rome through to Byzantium. There's evidence to suggest it might have even have had a similar flavor profile to Worcestershire sauce, which, comparatively, doesn't sound so bad. You know what is bad, though? The food coma that's about to hit you. You can feel it coming on like a rogue wave. You tell Ilara you're heading home to sleep it off, promising to help her clean up the mess tomorrow, a promise you may or may not regret in the morning. As you stumble back through the now darkening streets, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind you, you can't help but smile. It's good to be part of a community. Even if it does mean consuming questionable amounts of mead and dancing like a drunken hobgoblin. And who knows, maybe next year you'll finally manage to master that folk dance. Or maybe you'll just stick to the mead. You trudge back toward the village, the setting sun painting the fields in hues of orange and purple that honestly, Instagram filters can only dream of replicating. Your stomach rumbles a protest against the meager rations you managed to scrounge today. Hopefully, there's some stew waiting for you back in your, well, let's be honest, it's more of a hovel than a house. But hey, at least it's yours, sort of, given the feudal system and all. The air is thick with the smells of wood smoke and livestock. Not exactly Chanel No. 5, but it's home. As you walk, you mentally replay the day's events. Dodged a rogue pig, almost got trampled by a cart carrying something that smelled vaguely of manure, and managed to haggle a few extra turnips from old Maggie. Not a bad day, all things considered. Fun fact, did you know that most medieval peasants rarely bathed? Yeah, hygiene wasn't exactly a priority back then. Water was scarce, and the common belief was that bathing opened your pores to disease. So, you were basically marinating in your own filth. Charming, isn't it? Though, Some scholars, or perhaps those who simply enjoy a good soak, suggest that bathhouses, however infrequent in the life of some people, offered a somewhat cleaner experience. As you approach your dwelling, you see a few other villagers gathered around a small fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They're likely sharing stories and maybe a bit of gossip, the medieval equivalent of scrolling through social media, I suppose. You give them a weary nod and head inside, eager to escape the chill of the evening. Your home is a single room, dimly lit by a sputtering candle. A straw mattress lies in the corner, your bed for the night. Luxury? Not exactly. But it's shelter. You toss your tools in a corner, careful not to trip over the family of chickens that have apparently decided to take up residence. A quick check of the meager pantry reveals, not much. A few dried beans, a crust of bread, and a suspicious-looking piece of cheese. Tonight's feast will be a culinary masterpiece of bean broth and stale bread. Bon appetit. At least it's food. You could be out hunting, a dangerous prospect considering your skill with a bow and arrow is roughly equivalent to that of a blindfolded toddler trying to play darts. Now, historians still argue whether the medieval diet was truly as monotonous and bland as commonly portrayed. Some point to archaeological evidence of spices and herbs being used, suggesting that the upper classes, at least, enjoyed a more varied and flavorful cuisine. But for the average peasant, turnips, bread, and whatever they could forage or hunt were the staples. After your lavish meal, you settled down near the fire pit to mend your tunic. It's seen better days, sporting more patches than original fabric. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. More backbreaking labor in the fields. Perhaps a chance encounter with a wandering minstrel. Or maybe, just maybe, a day without incident. One can dream, right? Quirky fact alert, did you know that in some medieval villages, animal trials were a thing? Seriously. If a pig ate a baby, it could be put on trial, complete with lawyers and a judge. Imagine the legal arguments. Your Honor, my client, the pig, was simply acting on instinct. The absurdity of it all is rather delightful. As the night deepens, you can hear the sounds of the village slowly quieting down. The snorts of pigs, the barks of dogs, the occasional drunken singing, the soundtrack of medieval life. You extinguish the candle, plunging the room into darkness. Only the embers in the fire pit provide a faint glow. You lie down on your straw mattress, trying to find a comfortable position. The straw pokes you in various places, and the chickens are making a racket. Sleep doesn't come easily. Your body aches from the day's labor, and your mind races with worries. Will the harvest be good this year? Will you be able to pay your taxes? Will that weird rash on your arm ever go away? It's cold, and there's a draft from somewhere, and you reach for your threadbare blanket. However, you aren't the only one who finds it difficult to rest. The medieval period, despite its seemingly primitive existence, had an unlikely sleep aid, bedtime stories. Historians still argue whether they were for children alone. Passed down orally, these tales were often filled with fantastical creatures, moral lessons, and, well, probably quite a bit of fear-mongering to keep people in line. But hey, at least they had entertainment before Netflix. Eventually, exhaustion overcomes you. Your thoughts begin to blur, and you drift off to sleep, dreaming of fields of gold, endless feasts, and a life free from toil. A peasant can dream. As you settle into the darkness, the world outside begins to fade, and the soft embrace of sleep starts to take hold. The worries of the day slowly dissipate, like mist in the morning sun, leaving behind a sense of calm. The gentle rhythm of your breathing becomes the only sound, a soothing melody that lulls you deeper into slumber. The images of the day begin to blur and blend, the hard edges softening, creating a dreamscape of hazy memories and gentle imaginings. The faces of your fellow villagers, the fields you toiled in, the warmth of the fire, all these things melt together, forming a peaceful tableau that dances behind your closed eyelids. There's no need to fret about the morrow, about the burdens you carry, or the challenges that await. For now, all that matters is the present moment, the quiet sanctuary of sleep. Let the worries drift away, like leaves on a gentle stream, carried off into the vast ocean of oblivion. As the darkness deepens, and your mind grows quieter, imagine yourself floating on a cloud, weightless and free, drifting aimlessly through the starry expanse. Let the worries of the world fall away, like shedding a heavy cloak. Let yourself be cradled by the gentle embrace of sleep, and allow your weary body and mind to rest and rejuvenate. Close your eyes now, and let the comforting darkness wash over you, enveloping you in a sense of peace and tranquility. Surrender yourself to the soothing rhythm of your breath, and let the gentle cadence of sleep carry you away to a world of dreams. Sleep now, rest now, and let your worries fade, into the quiet night, sweet dreams.